Hello everyone, welcome back to the MotoGP Podcast, and pre-season testing is in the books. Marc Marquez is fastest, Ducati 2024 engines. Let's get straight into that. I am joined by Lewis Duncan. Lewis, are we surprised with the decision for Ducati to go 2024 engines and potentially chassis and aero for the first part of the season?
Not hugely, as we spoke about last week on the podcast, that we kind of thought it was going to go that way. The GP24 base is such a good, strong base, and with this 2-year engine freeze, there isn't really margin this time for Ducati to make any risks. You know, this was a sensible decision, and if you actually kind of think back to before pre-season testing, Pecco Bagnaia spoke about, you know, the engine that they tried in Barcelona, and he said, you know, there were good things about it, but we've asked Ducati to make some changes, and, you know, I think they might be able to do it. So already clearly from the off on, in November last year, that they weren't super happy with, maybe not necessarily super happy, I just don't think they were convinced enough then. And, you know, as Davide Tardozzi said today at the end of the Buriram Test, it's been a very condensed pre-season. It's not usual that we have a test and then a week and then straight into another test, and then in 9 days' time we're back racing. There's generally a couple of weeks in between. So, you know, with that in mind, with the 2-year engine freeze, I think Ducati was always going to go in this direction. They tried to make the 25 work. They couldn't really get it there. We don't really know specifically what. It sounds like kind of largely it's the braking, something to do with the braking performance. We know that was a problem before with the GP23 engine, and I think as well with the full GP22 that Bagnaia actually obviously ditched on, you know, on the Thursday of Qatar that year, which, you know, was pretty last minute. So they've had these lessons before of what happens when you go in one direction with an engine, you risk with an engine, it doesn't quite work out. So they've clearly learned from those mistakes, and I think the fact that both Marc and Pecco have both been like, yeah, the 24 is better, Ducati's not going to fight that. It does obviously create a new problem now, because now all 6 bikes they have on the grid have to have GP24 engines, which they won't have been ready for, so they've got a really hard kind of task on their hands to get all those engines ready, and maybe for these first few rounds they might be just a little bit nervous about spare parts. But, you know, that's Ducati hasn't made this decision as a knee-jerk reaction. If they've made this decision, they believe it's the right thing to do, and they also believe that they have the resources to make it work.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I don't think, like you say, Tarazzi actually mentioned that, didn't he? Because he's thinking, like, well, you know, they thought about it clearly. It's not like, what we're going to do, sort of panic. It's like, we kind of do. And funny enough, Bagnaia actually saying after that, kind of landed the media the whole way through pre-season that he knew that the 24 was pretty much the direction they were going to go. And obviously Marc Marquez, he's a bit more sort of guarded. He's not saying what's better, what's worse, but it's clear to see from his time attacks and stuff today and his long run pace, the 24 is still the big debate, even though it's effectively what you say, 1.5 years old, really, because since it really started, because it's obviously been tested and stuff with Pirro back at the half part of 23, so that bike is an absolute gem, isn't it?
You stumble across perfection very, very rarely. You think back to Honda with the RC211V. You know, that bike didn't really change very much for the sort of for those 4 years. It was almost perfect, and you know, Ducati clearly has a margin, and I think that's something that should worry the rivals, because Pecco said, you know, we focused a lot on the GP24 this test, and we found that there is more margin there with it. And, you know, that again comes back to, you can understand why they then have decided we don't need a GP25 engine, and even shelving the chassis and the aero parts that they've been testing. Mark's still a little bit unsure on the aero front, but I think really the plan is now get through these first 4 races, and then at the Jerez test after the Spanish Grand Prix, that's when they'll start to look at those things again, which isn't uncommon for Ducati. They've done that before, where they've maybe shelved something, brought it back, and it's that Jerez test is where they've really had some time to click with it. So, yeah, they are essentially starting the year on a GP24, although there are some GP25 kind of new bits on it. Both riders and Tardozzi have said the engine, there's a few different things that they've added to that engine that is different from the GP24. I would assume that's probably reliability related more than anything, but they'll never tell us, so there's no point speculating. Yeah, I think with Marquez's race run, half a second or whatever it was quicker than the all-time kind of race record on average. That is, that's the really impressive bit. Alex Marquez on the full GP24, he did have a few problems on his race run, but the 7/10 gap isn't going to be 1/10 the end of that. It's still there's going to be time in hand there for Marc Marquez. I mean, there's been this rhetoric of Ducati standing still.
No.
Ducati taking a bit of a back seat in terms of pushing the bike forward, is the others are still having to push harder, and if anything, they're in a position where they've got to homologate engines that that they haven't been able to perfect. They're good engines, but they're not like the GP24 engine, and so they're stuck with what they have for 2 years, which isn't as good as the GP24, or definitely doesn't appear that way right now.
Yeah, it makes me laugh, to be honest. I think, they might be standing still in the sense that the engine is older, but I mean, it's like they're 5 miles up the road and everyone's like walking behind them still, and it's like when you have, like you say, when you have perfection. Good point about Honda in the early 2000s. I mean, that was pretty much the perfect machine, and when Ducati have done what they've done now, and they're able to, and as you say, they're able to perfect an engine that still has a little bit more margin in it. When you hear that, you're like, well, how good is this thing, really? And I think that's the good point here. Bagnaia likened it to a GP24.9, as he said in the debrief. I'm like, so there is obviously, like you say, parts on there potentially from a 25 that help reliability. And when you see Marc Marquez doing what he did today in a longer run, yes, it was a small sample size in comparison with his brother and Pedro Acosta, who are both 7 tenths off. But that's clearly a sign that he's comfortable, he likes the bike. And Bagnaia is saying it too. He had a much better day compared to yesterday. He kind of got back to the feeling that he had. That's a good feeling. I don't think they're going to be caught, to be honest. I think they've got such a gap in hand that it's allowing them to just really, even if this isn't the most ideal preseason, they're still leading the way, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, if there's any of them that could be one threat over the next 2 years, it could really close the gap to them. You may be looking at someone like Yamaha, who, so long as they don't kind of exceed their concession threshold in terms of results, will be able to develop engines as well as Honda for 2026. Whether they will or not is kind of a different question, obviously, with this 2027 regulation change coming up. But the one factor where nobody really seems to be speaking about in terms of, this whole Ducati standing still thing, they have the best rider lineup on the grid. They have the best rider of the last 10, 12 years on the bike, and they've got statistically right now the manufacturer's best ever rider in Pecco Bagnaia. So you look at some of those results last year when Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia were 10 seconds up the road from even the next, third place GP24. Yeah, okay, they're not taking the big step forward with the bike, but they've got the riders to take that step. And most manufacturers, apart from Yamaha with Fabio Quartararo and Aprilia with Jorge Martin, really don't really have those difference, and KTM with Pedro Acosta as well, but they don't really have those difference makers, not in the same way that they can be consistently at the front in the way that Marc and Pecco certainly can, as we saw last year. Ducati are not going to be leaving Buriram worried. They'll be a little bit up against it with obviously getting all the engines sorted for all 6 of their bikes now that they're effectively the same spec. But it's a job that Ducati will be able to do, and a job made a little bit easier by the fact they don't have 8 bikes on the grid this year. I wonder how much that would have altered the decision with the GP25 had there been those 8 Ducatis on the grid, because then all of a sudden that is an even harder task to then have all the same spec all the way through. So, there may be some lucky things in there for Ducati as well. And obviously with the engine freeze being for 2 years, its kind of direct rivals can't steal a march on it anyway. So, they've got the best riders. Clearly they've got the best package still. we still need to see what Pecco Bagnaia can do in terms of where he is against Marc Marquez. He kind of had quite a difficult Buriram test, sort of trying different things, didn't work. Basically had to start from zero on the last day to find a way forward. So we haven't seen a proper race run from him yet. And obviously we haven't seen what Jorge Martin could do on the Aprilia, and we won't really see that for 4 or 5 rounds because he needs to learn on the job now because of the injury, which is an unfortunate thing for him.
Yeah, it is. We'll come on to Aprilia after we talk about Marc Marquez, just and his what you evaluate his pre-season as. I think, is it surprising? Is it a shock to people that he's really fast on this bike of Ducati? I mean, I'm not really surprised by it. I think it's something that I just thought was going to happen. Like, it's not arrogance or anything. He's that good, isn't he? When he gets into that mold of when he can gel with the bike, and when he's out logging laps, and I kind of seen it throughout today. I mean, there's a good clip of Fabio Quartararo telling him to come in because he's out there still doing laps and everyone else is taking lunch and they want to get their practice starts in. He just looked very focused with the media too. He's given that sort of impression that he knows what he has underneath him, and he's playing it down. And I think when he's playing his expectations down, he knows, well, clearly something's going right here if everyone's thinking I'm going to be the one to beat. And he would know that himself as well. I think his pre-season's been good. He's adapted to the environment of Ducati really well. And it's kind of not put Bagnaia on the back foot, but like you say, he had a tougher test than Marquez, which does that surprise? Maybe, but it must be reassuring for Marquez knowing that he's getting along with his crew chief as well, because he kind of mentioned that once you get that relationship going and they know what you want and they can understand how you give feedback, if you're getting that in already at the second test, it's a pretty good sign, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the Pecco thing, he's kind of over the past years had difficult winters. 2022 wasn't easy, as remember. 23 wasn't easy either. So, I wouldn't be too worried about that. Yeah, I definitely do think there will be a bit more pressure there this year because we'll be seeing what's going on the other side of the garage. They'll be seeing the data. They'll be seeing the lap times, and they will be thinking, how... I've ridden this bike essentially for 2 years now. I know this bike, the GP24 inside out. I know this Ducati inside out. How is he doing this, over me with less time and experience on the bike? So that will be a bit of a concern. I think in terms of, is it surprising to see Mark up there? Not really. You speak to anyone over the past year, everyone's been convinced that as soon as he jumps on a factory bike of what he can do. Mm-hmm. We spoke to Frankie Carcetti over the winter and he was like... It's not even close as to who's going to win the championship this year because he's saw the data of what Mark can do on that GP23. So, yeah, it's not surprising. I think it's not surprising to see Mark kind of play it all down. He's generally does that. And I think more than anything as well, he'll be even more step-by-step cautious now, just given from where he's come from and the injuries and stuff. And he knows that he's not the same rider as he was 5-6 years ago. So... The caution thing's not a surprise either, but yeah, you just look at the way things are. He was fastest on both days of the test in Buriram. He put in a really impressive sprint run in Sepang, which okay, Alex Marquez was faster, but that was kind of Mark's first proper sort of race sim on the GP24. Whereas obviously, Alex has been...
He'd been out doing whatever he had from day one.
And that was a fully sorted bike as well,
exactly.
Where Mark was obviously kind of going back and forth between 2025 stuff. So, and yeah, this race run that he did on Thursday, in Buriram was super, super impressive. Yeah, you're looking at Mark going into Thailand at the very least as favourite, but it's just harder and harder to look past him as being the favourite overall. He got the best bike. Doesn't matter if he's not taken a step forward. They will add parts to that bike at some point. Ducati are in a luxury position. I don't think I think this is being viewed that Ducati having 2024 bike to start the season with, essentially for its factory riders, is a bad thing. The reason they can do that is because the bike is so good. If another manufacturer, any of the other manufacturers, started the season on their 2024 bike, they would be 2 steps behind. The Ducati can start the 2024 bike and still be a step ahead of everyone. They don't need to throw things at the bike and get lost. They can use the first few rounds that are all quite mixed circuits. Buriram is different to Argentina, is different to Kota, and different to Qatar as well. Use those tracks test the chassis, the 24 chassis again, test the 24 aero again, get some good data on it compared to last year, and then Jerez comes around, put the 2025 bits on. We thought this 25 chassis when Pecco tried it, he said he was really happy with it, but if you remember, he tried it first at the Misano test when there was tons of grip on track, and he tried it again at the Barcelona test when there was tons of grip on track. The fact that he tried it then at Sepang and then at Buriram, especially Buriram, where there was no grip on track, or less grip anyway, because there wasn't the shakedown like there was in Sepang, it's not surprising that all of a sudden it's thrown up problems. So it's not really then surprising for them to be like, okay, we've got a test in, what are we, the 13th of February, in a month and a half time when we get to the Spanish Grand Prix. A month and a half, you can wait a month and a half to test a chassis when you've got, plenty of reasons to be hopeful that your current package anyway is going to allow you to fight for wins. So yeah, I think a lot of people want to view this as being a big problem for Ducati. It really isn't. If anything, it just shows the work that Gigi Dall'Igna's done. He'll be disappointed that his new developments haven't worked from an engineering point of view, but I don't think he's going to be all that disappointed in the fact that they can take a decision like this and not really have it be a major problem.
Yeah, exactly. Gigi might be disappointed, but perfection's very hard to come by, as you said. I think if you have that, Marc Marquez said it last week at Sepang, you need to be cautious with perfection. You can't try and overdo it sometimes, and that's what they've done. They've been cautious. They've realised what they had, and this is what they're going to do. So yeah, Ducati are in a perfect spot, I think, for continuing where they've left off from 24. Aprilia, I would arguably say, have had a better test than Buriram. It's quite easy to say. Marco Bezzecchi's done such a good job, to be honest, even though he's kind of playing it down a bit. He still says he's not up to scratch in the one lap sort of territory for his feeling with the Aprilia, but when you look at the timesheets, he's third overall fastest at 29 flat, and he's literally done great sprint pace as well. I'd say he's done a very good job, and he's put Aprilia in a good position considering that Jorge Martin isn't there. What do you think of how he's done over the past 2 days?
Yeah, given the circumstances, I think Bez has really stepped up in a bigger way than I thought he would. Yeah. I didn't really. I understood why Aprilia wanted him, and he was going to be fast on the bike. I didn't really see him being a good factory rider at the point when he signed that contract, because he'd never been in that position before. But he's never come across as being a particularly analytical rider. He's never given off that kind of leadership sort of vibe about him. But I think this pre-season's really focused him. It's forced him into it really, because he's got to learn the bike and he's got to learn being a factory rider for the first time. But with Jorge Martin out the way, and obviously Ralph Fernandez as well at Sepang, let's not. The impact of losing Ralph Fernandez is quite a big one, given he was the only one in Aprilia that has experience of the bike. Abez was forced to step up in a big way, and he was pretty quick and pretty comfortable looking in Sepang, and then he's come to Buriram, which has generally been not a brilliant track for Aprilia over the years, and he was good. He was fastest in terms of the race runs, but he only did a sprint simulation versus a longer one, so less fuel, less tyre wear, that type of thing. We're not saying that Marco Bezzecchi is somehow quicker than Marc Marquez. If you balance it all out, then I think Marquez does actually come out in front if you were to pull those averages from Bez's run out, which is again another feather in Mark's cap. But yeah, the Aprilia looks good. They've taken steps. It seems like they've taken steps forward in the right places without kind of taking away the really good points of the bike, which is this front end. I'm not that surprised that Bez is still struggling a little bit with the time attack, despite the fact that the time was actually quite good. I mean, the combined times here, he was third overall. That's not bad. So just the way to do the fastest lap on Aprilia probably is really, really different to the way that you extract the best from a Ducati, which is what he's used to, and that's going to take a bit of time. But I think Aprilia can be, first of all, really happy that the base they've clearly got for 25 is strong, that they've come out of this really difficult pre-season losing the world champion in a pretty good place. The bike that Jorge Martin's going to jump back on is going to be good. If anything, it'll hopefully just accelerate his development a bit, because they've done the hard work already. It won't stop, obviously, as factories don't. They'll have to develop a bit, but you'd like to think for these first kind of 4 races or whatever, they will probably just sort of focus on what they have and getting the riders up to speed, and then start to throw more things at it, especially for Jorge Martin. So yeah, I think I'm pretty happy. I think Bez is probably the standout of the preseason
Yeah.
for me, and just in terms of what he's done given the circumstances, and also just how he's grown into the role of being a factory rider as well. I'm really genuinely very impressed with that.
Yeah, he's been excellent, and like I say, I had some doubt as well about the factory sort of tag on him. Would he be able to kind of grow? And to be honest, he has. And it's really impressive to see it in terms of a person who, as you say, the way he comes across, it's like, can he really lead? Then you kind of see the leader in him's come out here, because I think he realizes as well it's a collective effort with Martin. There's no animosity there. Yes, their relationship hasn't been great in the past, but like they're kind of going to go in the same direction if they want to catch Ducati, and that's the key here. And I think he's shown that Aprilia have made a good signing and a number 2 rider with him, and I think it's a great step for them to. Well, just looking at timesheets over, I would still put Aprilia maybe the second best manufacturer after this test, considering from what we've seen over the past 2 days. I think it's a real indicator for where it's going to be the next in the Grand Prix. Like you said, there's a track they're going to struggle at. Well, they have struggled at in the past with heat and grip and whatever. I think it's a good sign, so it is, because yeah, where's Ayagura? He's 11th place for a rookie. That's a good step for him. Ralph Fernandez, he's 13th, coming back from surgery. I'd say the bike's working probably the best it's ever done around Buriram, which is surely a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Aprilia will obviously be quite cautious about how it, approaches this season, given what we saw last year, how we thought that the 24 was actually quite a good step forward, but then, as the season wore on, it kind of proved to be not the case. I think overall the fresh kind of perspectives that they brought in helped, because you had someone who'd been a really dyed-in-the-wool Aprilia rider like Alex Marquez there for years, so he kind of understood all the intricacies of the bike. You had a rider like Maverick Vinales who is super sensitive to any kind of change. We've heard this twice from him now in quite short space of time, where he was like, the best thing, Aprilia should have just kept the 2023 bike, and he said the same about Yamaha as well. Jordan, then you should have kept the 2016 bike, which isn't really very helpful if you're a factory, to be quite honest with you. So the fact they've got Marco in from a satellite Ducati, they've got Rowland kind of keeping him around, but still with reasonably fresh kind of knowledge of the bike, rather than he's not had so much time to let the kind of, like I say, those intricacies sort of become ingrained. Obviously, Ayagura is a rookie, so and a pretty laid back one at that. So that, I think that probably helps. And missing Jorge Martin will have been a massive, massive shame for Aprilia. They could have really done with his input, but yeah, they've walked away from preseason testing in as best a shape as they probably could, and they still, like you say, I think you're probably right, they are kind of back into that second manufacturer spot, certainly over KTM. Honda and Yamaha, we kind of have to see what happens when we get to the race.
Yeah, we'll touch on KTM. We don't know what the factory riders are saying, because they haven't spoke to anyone this week, which, make of that what you will, it's a bit peculiar. But yeah, Acosta's long run, I can kind of have it in front of me here, similar to Alex Marquez. I heard whispers from the paddock saying that they're still struggling with rear grip, which is something that I thought would be at the top of their list to actually combat and get rid of, but it seems that they're struggling there. Brad Binder had a crash yesterday. I think Acosta crashed as well. Just seems to be that, not that they're overriding the thing, it just seems to be the bike still is in that window where it's struggling with its grip, which is difficult to really get your head around after how many seasons now? 2, 3? Really, they've had a proper struggle with it.
Yeah, and worst of all, it seems like the vibration issues that they struggled with last year are still there. You haven't really heard that from anyone else, so yeah, I think what we're seeing here is the where Pedro kind of fits into it on the timesheet and on the long runs as well, is that a lot of that is the rider rather than the bike. Because if you look at his long run over 22 laps of 31.0, which is the same as Alex Marquez's, but we heard from Alex Marquez that he had an electronic problem. So you assume then there's probably 4/10 missing from Alex Marquez's time there. So yeah, I don't think KTM can leave Buriram being particularly happy. We've seen over the past two tests they've just been throwing parts of the bike, which is what KTM always does. We heard it a lot on the television broadcasts and stuff. This is what KTM does. They bring lots of items and they try and piece it all together on the last day. It's been eight years now. That hasn't really worked. Let's be real about it. This hasn't worked for KTM. Their approach doesn't work. They haven't put a bike on the grid that can consistently fight for race wins. They certainly haven't put a bike on the grid that can get anywhere near fighting for the championship. For the last few years, they barely had a bike that consistently fight for the podium. If it wasn't for Pedro Costa on the bike last year, you're looking at basically Brad Binder's podiums from Qatar as being the highlight. So there's clearly something a bit more fundamental wrong there with bike philosophy, development philosophy. Just something clearly isn't working. KTM's bike is radically different to everyone else's. It initially had the steel frame. It's now moved to a full carbon fiber frame that nobody else does. Obviously, it has WP suspension, which nobody else does. These haven't been winning combinations in MotoGP for a long, long time. When was the last time a steel frame won a championship? It must have been the Ducati, back in 2007.
Yeah, probably.
So you've KTM stick to its fundamentals, great, and obviously having the carbon fiber chassis has moved away a little bit from that steel frame thing, but it still isn't working. They've obviously got this uncertainty hanging over their head with their future. They can't have a bad season this year. They need to have results and prove that the racing arm of the company, especially the Grand Prix arm of the company in MotoGP, is a worthwhile investment while it has to repay all this debt and restructure its company. Because if it doesn't, then it's hard. It will be very, very hard for those kind of creditors to sort of justify, why are we only getting 30% of our money back when this project isn't going anywhere, and if you bin that off then you can pay us back more money. That just they're and the fact that the factory riders aren't speaking to us this week is strange. The Tech 3 riders have, but what are you hiding? Is it because the bike is a lot worse than you thought it was and you don't want the riders saying so? Because we've heard from both Maverick and Enea that they haven't really been that happy. Enea says he just cannot ride the bike. It doesn't suit his riding style. Maverick's been a lot more diplomatic, but I think this is maybe because Maverick probably had a chance to stay at Aprilia, but on a lot less money than he was on at the time. And he's taken another option thinking he can do better, and he's gone even further down the grid from where he thinks he should be. So he's not going to be kind of spouting off, because ultimately, he's played his cards, and he's played them in a way that hasn't worked out just yet. So yeah, honestly, if you were going to if I was to rank the job that all the manufacturers have done this pre-season, KTM's dead last. It's great that they brought loads of stuff to the bike, but if none of it's really working, you look at the kind of the gains that Honda have been making, that Yamaha have been making. Yeah, KTM's always a hard one to read, and we'll probably get to the first Grand Prix and they'll be quick. We've seen that before in the past, but that's then never really led on to anything tangible beyond that. So yeah, if I'm KTM right now, I'm worried about what I've seen over the pre-season. The race runs were not that encouraging. The tyre life seems to be a problem because of this rear grip issue, I assume. So yeah, I don't think KTM are going to be very, very happy with what's happened these past 5 days.
Yeah, it's hard to say. We only get two riders speaking, and it's the two new guys. It's difficult to really judge off the experienced ones. So just to read through, Pedro Costa ended combined 4th place, 129.1 on his fastest lap. Maverick Vinales was 9th. He done a 129.606, and then Brad Binder was a 129.732, and then Bastianini was 15th. He was a 129.837. We'll just wait and see at the first round, really. I think it's a time of waiting to see with KTM, because like you say, it could be quick. They could be where they are now in testing, and you don't know. Yeah,
I think the other thing for me as well is that one thing we heard a lot from Aki Ayo, the new team manager, over the winter was keep it simple.
Yeah.
The fact that we've gone through 2 tests and we've heard that they've had tons and tons of new parts, and they've been trying 2024 bits and 25 bits. They've already kind of not really following that sort of mission statement. So, I think Akiara is going to need to really get them to bash their heads together a little bit and say, look, I said keep it simple. We need to keep it simple here, because clearly we're going kind of just chasing our tails at this point.
Yeah, let's see what KTM do. Although there is positivity on the other side. Japanese manufacturers, I think, can be very happy with their work of these two tests. We'll start with Honda, actually. I think Joan Mir has been the eye catcher really from both tests. Maybe it's just because it was so bad last year that he's kind of refocused, and he showed a lot of good speed. Maybe the private test helped that they had at Buriram last month with Nakagami and Espargaro to give them that base of information to know the direction they need to go in. But to actually do it and to be 6th overall in the combined times in terms of fastest lap at 29.399, and he's done a really fast sprint run as well. I think it averaged out at a 30.338. That's second fastest when you look at sprint times. I think Honda are in a really good position. Even Marini yesterday was fast. So, very encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Honda can be happy with what they've seen. I mean, from the off, they were pretty positive about kind of the updates that were coming. Joan Mir was saying that Santi Hernandez, his crew chief, was a lot more positive this year than he was at the start of last year. So, again, we need to kind of see where they are in races. I don't think we're going to get to Thailand and all of a sudden you're going to see Joan Mir fighting for the top 6 in a Grand Prix. That would be great, but I don't think that's really what's going to happen. We have been missing quite a couple of really crucial parts of, where we think the competitive order will be, like Fabio Di Giannantonio, for example, like Jorge Martin. So, but yeah, overall, like, the bike has looked better. It's clearly made steps forward. The riders are clearly happy. They're obviously still not quite touching on the fundamental issues, rear grip being the key thing, and that was the same for Yamaha as well. But they have the concessions. They can do these things. Like you say, that private test with the test riders probably did help just to find that base, which is kind of what Honda need. They just need direction. So if you can sort of streamline that a little bit, have 2 good test riders out there on a circuit, find a base setup, so then you can focus on new parts, everything. It sounds like they're pretty much locked in on what they're going to race with, for the first sort of few rounds, which is positive. It's small steps, but small steps for Honda is better than where it was last year. You look at kind of like Mir's fastest time, for example, is almost 0.4 quicker than the best Honda lap from last year at the Grand Prix. So, that's good. If you're finding 0.4, from just a few months ago, then that's better than nothing. If you're actually going to look at it, Yamaha were actually slower on their overall fastest lap compared to the previous year. But the mitigating circumstances of Fabio wasn't very happy with the front tyre, so he reckons about 3 or 0.4 went missing there. So if that is the case, then Yamaha jump ahead of Honda on that one. But all in all, yeah, it's good that the Japanese manufacturers have actually started to use these concessions to really pull themselves up the grid. And I think I think by mid-season we can start to have some really quite lofty kind of ambitions for both manufacturers. I'm really pleased that Joan Mir seems to be
happy.
Well, first and foremost, yeah, but more than that is stepping into being kind of leader that Honda needs a world champion like Joan Mir to be. So, it hasn't been, when something hasn't been quite right in the bike, he's not come off and gone, oh, this is rubbish, it's not working, blah, blah. Just like, this is good, this isn't working, but, overall it's good. That's what Honda needs. They just need a bit of perspective, really, is that some things will work, some things won't, but progress is progress, and you need to cling on to that. You can't take big steps, and I think Yamaha has the same as well. Quartararo said they've got no targets. People have been calling him a dark horse, all the rest of it. He's like, we'll just see what happens when we get to the race weekend. Buriram is probably one of the worst tracks for Honda and Yamaha on the calendar, with those rear grip problems, so many hard acceleration points. So it might not actually be the most kind of representative first round for them. But in saying that, if they can come out of the Thailand Grand Prix looking in an alright position, given it's not a great track for them, as we were saying with Aprilia as well for Buriram, that's really encouraging. So, Yeah, I think they'll be happy with what they've seen this winter, and they know that their work's not done as well. They've got more testing to do. They've got a lot more opportunities to improve that bike. So the fact that they've got onto a good level already, they're not already looking at like, oh well, the start of the season is going to be rubbish. We'll wait for the next test, sort of thing. Kind of like it was, excuse me, kind of like it was last year. It's just all round much more positive, and clearly you could see that from the lap times. There is clearly a step forward.
Yeah, there is, and it's like the crucial point is last year they went the wrong direction. It took them half a season to correct it. They haven't went the wrong direction, it seems now, so I'm happy for them, to be honest. I like MotoGP being competitive, and I like the fact that Yamaha came off very positive again. I think it was, I don't know if it was Max Bartolini or if it was the new team manager yesterday on After the Flag talking. I think it was the team manager, Paolo Preveso, isn't that his name? Like he said that they're pleased, to be honest, even though Quartararo had some issues yesterday, and they're still getting positive numbers compared to, say, 6 months ago. And I think that's the key, isn't it, for Yamaha, because they have two new bikes as well. And I think Jack Miller's really acquitted himself well in terms of adaptation, which you look at whatever way you want with Jack, it's still a positive side that he sees that bike in a much better light than he probably did with a KTM, and he's only been on the bike for 6 days, so I think that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, he's been consistently quite quick on it all pre-season, so that definitely is encouraging for Yamaha. That they've got two riders right now that look pretty happy, and I think really the best way to tell if things are good at Yamaha right now is Fabio Quartararo's body language, and we've seen him over the pre-season. He's been a lot happier. He's been a bit more jokey. He's a bit more laid back. When there's some problems with the bike, he's not been super kind of down about it, whereas maybe in the past he would be quite dour about the whole thing. So yeah, they've made steps. The steps that we saw in Sepang, they weren't quite as far forward in Sepang at Buriram as they was in Sepang, sorry, but again, that's kind of, there are some factors there. It's not the best circuit for the Yamaha. They haven't quite clicked on how to fix the rear traction issue, which is obviously going to be very much accentuated at a track like Buriram, and Fabio wasn't happy with the front tyres. This is a guy that qualified 6th last year for the Grand Prix, so you can assume that there is a bit more time in there if he can get a bike that he's comfortable with. So I think they will go into Thailand as long if the front tyres that Richland are in a good way, and the ones that make Fabio feel comfortable, then there's no reason that he can't really be aiming for that top 6 on the grid again. I think Honda were 12th as well, so that's right. If they can start the season pretty much where they finished it off last year, and with those types of results, then that should be the aim for both of them, and I think that would be a really, really good start to the season for them.
Yeah, I think so too. So many days we have to wait? 13, 12? Something like that. It's not long away anyway. It feels strange that the season's actually going to start in February, but MotoGP's back, and I think we got a lot more answers compared to what we did last week from Sepang. I think you're kind of seeing the order of Ducati are fast still. Marc Marquez is quick. GP24s are quick. Pecco Bagnaia has kind of came through the storm a bit, and I think he's still got a lot in hand. And I don't want to burst people's bubbles, but I think when we get to race runs and stuff and practice, I think you're going to see a 93 and a 63 at the top an awful lot. So yeah, but the battle behind, I think, is the really interesting one, because are Aprilia going to be able to progress and maybe try and pull away from the chasing pack, or will we see someone from the Japanese, like you say, Fabio Quartararo, can he just know that the bike that he has, and can he add that extra 5% that he can with his talent? I'm really excited for the start of the season, to be honest. And the one last question I have for you, Lewis, you said who your rider was of testing. Well, who's going to be your favourite heading into the Grand Prix?
No, it's Marquez, isn't it? Marquez. I mean, both Marquez's really. I don't think you can look past either of them. Alex has been really, really strong all winter, even going back to the Barcelona test. So, and those early races are a really good time for the GP24 riders, especially now that the factory riders are even kind of further, closer towards them than they maybe would be, at the start of the season normally. So, I think Mark is your favourite, but you can't really rule out Alex. And yeah, I think Peck will be up there as well. We haven't really seen him show his hand yet, and I
Yeah.
think, I'm really excited to see what Pecco Bagnaia can do this year, because it's the biggest challenge he's had in MotoGP, and there is an opportunity for us to see just this another level brought out of who we know is already a great rider. So there's a lot to look forward to for Thailand. I think come the end of Friday, you're either going to have a field that is super, super close, or you're going to have a field that, someone like Marc Marquez has just really stretched his legs. Either way, it will be an interesting kind of storyline to begin the season with.
It will be. Well, my rider of pre-season, I was tossed between two, Bezzecchi or Alex Marquez. I'm going to say Alex Marquez because he jumped on that 24 quick straight away in Barcelona. Yes, he loves Sepang, but he was really impressive, I think, in terms of what he done in Buriram. I even think his brother said, hang on, this is pretty good. Where'd you kind of pull this from, sort of thing? And he said to after the flag, he was like, well, I've got a fast teammate and a fast housemate. So I think it shows Marc Marquez is looking at his brother going, well, hang on, you've really upped your game here on that 24. And I think Alex, over the first 4 or 5 rounds, if he can sneak a sprint win somehow, even try and fight for podiums and even, I don't know, show something in a Grand Prix, that'll set him up nicely for the season ahead, so it will. And the favourite going into the Grand Prix for Buriram, I think it's Marc Marquez, just judging off what he showed there. And he talked about getting that sprint or that race simulation off his to-do list, and he said he's happy that he got it out of the way. I mean, if you're doing that and you've got that out of the way, you can be pretty confident with the work you've done over the 2 days at Buriram. But that's it. We'll be back next week with, I don't know yet, I haven't decided, are we going to do a preview, reviewing testing and looking ahead for the season as a whole, but I don't know. I think we'll just kind of pick something, a topic, so that'll be with you on Monday, and then the week after, it'll be straight into Grand Prix mode, which is quite scary, actually. This game runs so fast. But yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, comment who you were impressed by throughout all of testing. If you're listening, 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, helps out massively. See you next week. Take care.